Okay, here we go, continuing. So Roosevelt did that in the World's Fair in 1939. Whoa, just before World War II broke out. July, NBC and CBS have a local station in New York. And you can see the story here. Again, after World War II, which ended in 1945, things really picked up and moved from radio to TV. Audiences moved, programs moved, advertisers moved, dollars moved, everything moved from radio to TV. Okay, these, I don't think did I show you this? Oh my gosh, I don't remember. So long ago. I think I did. Milton Berle, the first TV superstar with the Texaco Star Theater, which ran from 48 to 56. He basically put a vaudeville show live on TV. It had a curtain and a stage and everything. It just shows how lots of times a new technology there'll be carryover from the old technology. Because people don't know quite what to do with it. And that always interests me. The fact, for instance, that power of automobiles is described in horsepower, I think is an example of an old technology, so to speak, carrying over to the newer technology. And with railroads, they were called iron horses for quite a while. So a couple of examples, the same thing. And at first, again, it was one sponsor per show, but that changed. But basically in 1948, 3 years after World War II, there were less than 200,000 black and white TVs in the U.S. And then a few years later, 8 years later, there were 21 million. And like radio, TV is sold by day part. You should know this. These are the key day parts for television. Here's another look at it. This is from your book, where I just copied a couple of charts and displays that I thought were interesting from your textbook. From early morning to late night, prime time, of course, being the most expensive when the family sits in front of the TV with their TV dinners. And here are some of the program formats for TV we've all heard of right here. Ratings. So just like radio, TV ratings are measured daily and are the basis for revenue and sales. Nielsen has been the leading company sort of from day one in terms of ratings. And they actually had picked families to be Nielsen families, 5,000 households, where the family would be given a diary and they had to write down what they watched. Now there are more sophisticated ways of doing this, where there are monitors on televisions that send in information, but it's still, the monitor doesn't know who's watching. So people still have to do individual viewer reporting. Nielsen has demographics, and you saw the importance of ratings with the film of Network, where, as you'll recall, Howard Beale's ratings go from next to nothing up to a 40 or a 50 share. 40 or 50 share means that 40 or 50% of all the TV viewing households were turning into his show. And because of the ratings increase and the viewership increase, the television network there is able to charge much, much more for the commercials, make a lot more money, and take the network from being in the red to being in the black. And this is the importance of viewership. By the way, Nielsen added viewership for up to 5 days after the initial airing in 2016 to reflect, video recording devices and things. So these are some of the ways that people buy television or kind of approach the opportunities in the television market. So do you want to reach the whole country? If so, you're going to buy network TV. You can actually cut out a big part of the West Coast in network TV, but we don't need to, and buy that separately, but we don't need to get into that. Spot TV is buying by market, which we saw was the most popular way of buying radio these days. Not the most popular way of buying TV, but a very popular way. And here's where you would go to SRDS, Standard Rate and Data Sources, the website, and look up TV buying and look by market and see all the stations that were available and the contacts and the people who work there. So if you were buying the market, you could reach out to the people who are selling the time directly. You can also, of course, on cable, buy individual networks on cable. And by the way, you can also buy cable locally. So you can buy by going to the cable operators in the markets and just air your ad locally that way. And another whole way of buying is via syndication. And syndicated programs are those who are created by sort of third-party independent producers. And then these syndicated programs are sold across the country to local stations for the most part. So, for instance, Oprah was a syndicated program for many, many years, probably the most popular one in history. Game shows are normally syndicated programs. And you can also place your ads in those should you want to. You remember with radio, we had Arbitron naming the local markets, and here it's done. Nielsen came up with this, and local TV markets are called DMAs, which stands for Designated Market Area. And here is a breakdown of the U.S. by DMA, so that if you buy Houston, you're buying a chunk of geography. It's not just the Houston metro, okay, just as we saw with radio. TV creative is pretty much all pre-recorded video. It comes in different time lengths. A long time ago when I started in the business, people were still running 60-second commercials on network TV. And then it went to 30, and that's still the most popular length for TV ads. But there are also 10-second ads and 15-second ads. Now, in the old days, interestingly, for instance, when I ran the Cascade dishwasher detergent business early in my career, we couldn't air an ad showing Cascade washing dishes and how the dishes came out versus a competitor. We had to supply the networks that would air the ads with the laboratory proof of how we washed the competitor dishes, how we washed the Cascade dishes. We had to prove that we really delivered that result for it to be able to air. I think those standards are still in place, but when you see all the political advertising these days, which again is mostly spot and local, you do have to shake your head and wonder about proving claims and how important that is to the overall TV business. Oh, by the way, a little tip on TV ads that I learned working on Procter & Gamble, and this is really true. You'll remember that in presenting, I'm always saying that the visual communicates more strongly than what you say, which is why your visual aids need to be concise and not too many words on them, and have a symbol or a picture of something more than you're using text. It's the same with a TV commercial. So one way to see if your commercial is really communicating to viewers is to watch it with the sound off, by the way. There's a growth in the amount of TV time devoted to ads on cable, and you can see the details there. And we also know that there are ways of avoiding ads with TiVos and recordings and everything. Here's another chart from your book, which shows number of commercials. Basically, it's the commercial clutter trend between 1990 and 2013. It's gone way up. A lot more commercials being aired now than there were in the 90s. And also, as you see at the bottom chart, a lot more 15-second ads. In 2013, there were 44%. Very few 60s anymore. So FYI on that. Now here we get to the issue, which we all know is key in the kind of where video is now and where it's going. is that video content is not just watched on the large screen TVs at home. They're watched on via TV connected devices, and they're watched on PCs and on tablets and on smartphones. And this trend is growing and growing and growing. Key trend now in terms of major companies, these are the major, I think you could say, networks. And of course, Fox now is changed, and big chunk of Fox is now owned by Disney because there has been a lot of consolidation. Here are cable players. These are the companies that own the wires, who've laid down the cables and managed the communication networks. These are the big players. Spectrum is the one that has bought HBO cable. There's still an HBO network. And here are some of there are lots of big cable networks. We all know Discovery and, lots and lots of them, but here are a few. So these, let's now look kind of at viewership in terms of cable networks. This is from your book, and it's 2015 data. You can see that in terms of subscribers, TBS is the first with 100 million, et cetera, et cetera. And then number of channels received, you can see also has gone way, way up, and that is a factor of cable coming into the marketplace and kind of breaking through. People getting their TV via radio waves and antennas on their roofs. And in those days, you just got 3 or 4 channels or networks, really not too much. And by the way, in those days, an advertiser could roadblock. It was called running a roadblock, where you would take the same ad and air it on all 3, ABC, CBS, NBC, all 3 networks at around the same time of night, and reach 80% of the viewing, 85% of the viewing public. That was called a roadblock. It's kind of hard to do now. I guess you could do it on the Super Bowl, but in terms of doing it on networks or on channels, there are just too many of them, too many choices. Everybody, by the way, and that's why out-of-home advertising has become the last unavoidable medium, or one big reason for it. This is, again, from your book. This shows, and this is a few years ago, but it shows properties of ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. What do they own, or who owns them in some cases? And again, this has changed quite a bit. NBC doesn't own Time Inc. magazines. They sold them. In fact, Time Inc. magazine is owned by the guy who owns Salesforce, Mark Benioff. Salesforce is a B2B CRM platform, very successful. But here you see what the big networks are doing in terms of diversifying their business and getting into internet and other things. And as I said before, the CAB is now, the Cable Advertising Bureau is now the Video Advertising Bureau. And here's a link to their website and another link to the Spot TV Association website. I'm actually not going to do that now. Let's talk about some of the most viewed shows. And this is for the U.S., and these are the most watched shows of the 2016-2017 season, and you can see football kind of rules the roost. NCIS also big. Big Bang Theory, 60 Minutes, The Voice. So here are viewership numbers. And here are the top 10 syndicated TV programs. Remember, these are the ones that are sold. The programming is sold, owned by an independent company, and it's sold to local TV stations. And here are the big players in that. Here is Netflix and Amazon viewership. And Orange is the New Black season 4 was really huge. And viewership had not been tracked on this platform before, but this company, Source Symphony Advanced Media, has been doing it. We saw this early on in the class. These are worldwide viewership numbers, because we need to think not just about the U.S., but about what's going on in other parts of the world. And you can see sports, Olympics, soccer, etc., are the big viewership numbers. I think we're about to start, and I'll just stop rather, and I'll have a little